Welcome to Writers Blockbusters, the show where we treat the final edit of the movie like the script. I'm one of your hosts, Bob Rose. You can find me at Thundergrunt Bob on Twitter. And now one of the other guys is going to introduce themselves, and I'm choosing Jamie Nash.
I am Jamie Nash. I am the writer of Save the Cat, Writes for TV, and the Save the Cat Beat Sheet Workbook. I'm also, I'll plug it now. I can finally plug this thing. It's finally out. My new webinar, the Beat to Board, the Save the Cat Beat to Board webinar it's really the thing that takes you from beat sheet to the next step. So if you ever got to a beat sheet and said, what do I do next? And some people jump to a beat sheet. If you want to do like index cards and really break out all the scenes, it's a little webinar you can purchase. I think it's around $60, something like that. It's kind of like a little master class type thing, maybe a couple hours long. But anyway, with a lot of handouts and stuff. So check it out if you're interested. That's my plug. I'm also, by the way, I'm also a screenwriter too. So I wrote the book and I write screenplays.
Wrote a bunch of movies.
And you play pickleball,
wrote a bunch of movies. And pickleball I played this morning.
And he juggles too, dude.
Oh, and he juggles too. Yeah,
I'll do that tomorrow. I'm like Buckaroo
Skill
Banzai.
for podcasting.
I'm the modern day Buckaroo Banzai.
Yeah.
I am Jimmy George. I am a screenwriter and script consultant. My Twitter handle, by the way, is at Jimmy R. George.
Okay, and we are here to talk about the now, as we were saying before we recorded, almost 10-year-old movie, John Wick. From 2014, not chapter 2, not chapter 3, Parabellum, and not chapter 4, just John Wick. Before we get into our talking points, let's go around the table and talk about give a few sentences on our relationship with this movie. Let's start with Jimmy.
So I'm not, and we haven't talked about this at all, so I don't know your relationships with this, but last night was only the second time I've seen this movie, and I haven't even seen 2, 3, or 4 that just came out. So I don't have like a love for this franchise, mainly because, like I talked about in the Batman episode, I have like a family history with gun violence, and ever since then, like I just don't gravitate toward movies, even if they're well made with people I love. I just don't gravitate toward movies with like insane amounts of gun violence anymore. And so despite that, I think it's a fantastic movie. I really enjoyed it. And I think there's like a lot of craft that we're not going to talk about that you can learn. Like I think this one has a great example of an action figure exercise. I think there's like, I wrote down like 10 transitions, but I didn't put them on the talking points. There's like 10 transitions in here that are super instructive, that are written on the page. There's great like circus mirror. We're not doing the circus mirror of the villain versus hero, but it's a great example of how to craft a villain that's like the worst case future self of your hero. It's got so much craft, and that's why I think it stands the test of time. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Jamie?
Yeah, to me, this was a solid movie when I saw it. I was excited to see Keanu. I'm not necessarily a fan of gun violent movies, but I've grown up with being a fan of movies that get creative with gunfights. Let's put it that way. I do like a movie that gets creative. So I was a big John Woo fan as a kid, or growing up. They were my formative years. I love John Woo, all that kind of stuff. Equilibrium is a movie I'm a big fan of with Christian Bale. So I like movies that kind of get a little cartoony with it. I remember that movie
Shoot 'em Up.
Shoot 'em Up. Yeah. I think
love
Shoot 'em Up is sort of underappreciated for that reason. So I do like the movies that good. It gets a little comic booky. Shoot 'em Up was
it literally is Bugs Bunny versus Yosemite Sam. The director said that. That's
wow.
So it's not realistic whatsoever.
Gotcha.
Yeah. It's like Clive Owen, right? With a baby, and he's got a gun. He's a killer. He's kind of like John Wick with a baby, and he's like guarding the baby while he's in gunfights and stuff. It's wacky.
It's really wacky,
but it's really a silly kind of like gunfighting movie. Like kind of what I think this movie's kind of silly in its own way. I mean, it's in a good way. It's kind of influenced by video game culture and stuff like that. You know, very much so. Like you almost feel like there should be a kill count on the screen at all times.
There's a Call of Duty aspect to it. Yeah,
yeah. There's even a video first-person shooter video game sequence in the movie.
So for me, anyway, this is just my long way of saying, like, I like an occasional movie like this. I kind of like when they're a little more stylized, like this. I like how this one gets stylized. But to me, this is like, it's not like my favorite movie or franchise of all time, but it's definitely a solid movie. And I've seen all of them, except I still haven't seen the latest one. I still haven't checked it out. Mainly because I think it's like 3 hours or something. And I
2.5.
haven't had 2.5. Well, that's not bad. That's not as bad as I thought.
Yeah, I checked the runtime on this before. I was like, am I gonna have time to watch it 2 times, or is it fucking 5 hours long?
No, this is way more modest. Yeah. Is that good, Jamie? You done?
Yep.
I was gonna say, when this came, this was one of those movies where, like, I saw this with 2 listeners of the show, actually, Michael Zaccardi and Sean Jones, and we were just like going to see Keanu's latest movie, and at that time, the Keanu Sans hadn't come around, and I think this was kind of like in that genre of what if older guys kick some ass, kind of in the like, you know, Liam Neeson had kind of resurged at that point and everything. So we were just like, oh, Keanu's got one now. Let's go see this on an offhand night where we didn't really have any big expectations. And then I just remember very vividly walking out of the theater, and all 3 of us were like, this was like really awesome, right? Like we were all like completely blown away by this movie because our expectations were in the gutter. We were kind of expecting just a nothing action movie, and then it turned into what it is. You know what I mean? The premise excited us so much. We were like, was it really about that?
I might have been late to the party on it. I think I might have seen it and I was like, yeah, it's like Taken and stuff. I'll wait. I'll watch it eventually, but I'll wait.
Right.
And then everybody was like, oh, it's really, really good. And I'm like, what's Keanu? Well, everybody seems to love it.
Marketing was bad. The poster doesn't say anything. It all seemed very generic for 2014. It seemed like, you know, it didn't. I was not expecting the style or the plot going into that at all. Like, I remember as the movie kept progressing, I told the guys when we walked out the theater, I was like, I kept thinking, like, wait, is this actually the plot of the movie? Like, is this what this movie's about? I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God. And then you add in the world building and everything. I was like, this is so far surpasses any, like, you know, Paycheck movie that we were expecting, you know. And like now after 10 years, it's like this phenomenon. I don't know if I even saw a negative review for John Wick 4. People love this stuff, you know. Right. And I'm a really big action movie guy. I don't necessarily love guns at all. When
I say that, like, I grew up with all the 80s and 90s stuff that was just full of that, and I still love it because you know, I loved it then, but like I just don't gravitate to that now.
To what Jamie said too, though, I think in those times it was a little more cartoony, had more levity to it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I'm not a big fan of like serious gun movies, or I don't know what that would entail, but yes, like the tone of this franchise is just corny enough while not winking at the camera.
Right.
I enjoy it.
It's not self-aware.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I do love this movie, and I think I'm glad we're doing this one because out of all of them, this is the most grounded one. I think it's the best one to talk about the script
from a screenwriting standpoint. Yeah,
as the only one of us who has seen John Wick 4, it's awesome. I don't think it'd be a good script podcast. like it's not about that anymore.
Gotcha. It's not about the set pieces and the action, probably.
Right? And it works for people, and that's
why they go.
That's why they go. But
it's John Wick genre expectations.
Right. But this one is, out of all of them, this one has the most to talk about, the most craft.
I even remember, I mean, just to talk about this movie a little bit, like Red. There's a movie called Red, and I was a big horror book person. So Jack Ketchum wrote this book called Red, and it was basically about this kind of redneck kind of guy, lives by himself, and his house gets robbed one night, and he doesn't have enough money, so they kill his dog, and then he goes on a killing spree. And it was, so when I saw this movie, I'm like, it's Red, and they had made a movie of Red. It wasn't a huge movie, but it was a Lucky McGee, who I'm also a big fan of, movie in 2008, 2009. So there's another reason I was like, it's the old dog revenge plot. I've seen, I read Jack Ketchum, 10 years ago. What are they just ripping off Jack Ketchum now and to make an action movie, which is what people do when they come up with concepts.
It's a genre hybrid, man.
Totally different movie.
What the dog means more, man.
The funny thing about Red, and Red was really, it was trying to speak to how important dogs were to people like this guy in that movie, but I think played by Brian Cox actually in that.
Oh, wow.
If you watch it, but Red is more the horror version in a weird sort of way, even though the protagonist is the same guy, but he's more violent and it's more dark and it's more, it doesn't have shooting people in the feet and stuff like that, or
it's got a different version of that with horror paint.
Yeah. It's like, I'm going to hunt you back
also,
and
he's not
destroy
Keanu.
you. He's not Keanu.
Let's be honest. He's not Keanu.
Brian Cox is scary in a much different way than Keanu. So, yeah.
It's kind of like how he was in Manhunter, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that was lost on anybody. Yeah.
Except we're on board with him. I guess maybe you might be on board with him in the Manhunter too. I don't know. He's kind of a hero.
I'm on board with his performance, not with the character. Yeah, right. I'm on board with the performance. Yeah. Anyway, Jamie, who wrote this shit?
That is an interesting question that
I can answer. If you want me to answer it, I can answer right now.
So Derek Kolstad wrote it, and what I find most interesting about this spec sale, because it was a spec sale, is he had been working in the industry for 20 years before this one sold.
I didn't.
And he had some other he had some other credits, but they're movies you wouldn't have heard of. Like he has, I'm just looking at the IMDb. I was scrolling down to see it. There's One in the Chamber, The Package, the After School Special, which is a short, The Forge, Subject, Aries, and then John Wick. So, and those movies started in 2012. There was one, right around 2014. So even those, he just had recently kind of gotten a couple things produced. But John Wick was
right at the beginning of his career, right? This is
he didn't
have a huge career before this.
So most of the articles about him are 20 years in and he's an overnight success. And I don't really think that's that rare. I think most of the people that are screenwriters listening to this should understand they might be in it for 20 years, but if they keep at it, their John Wick might really be in the future. It really might be. And after John Wick, stay healthy. Because honestly, it does take that long. It really does. Even if you have some little successes along the way, sometimes it takes 20 years to get to that next level thing to kind of chip away. So, after John Wick, he did, the original things. First of all, if you write a movie like John Wick, I guarantee you he was on every rewrite of every action movie, that came out from that point on. He probably has 20 different movies he didn't get credit on just because he wrote John Wick.
That pays the bills though, right?
That pays the bills big time. And in fact, probably pays the bills more than, I don't know if it pays the bills more than John Wick, but it might have. It might. Right. So yeah, those movies pay the bills. But after that, just as credits, he gets character by for all the other movies. I don't think he wrote any of the other movies.
I think he wrote 2.
Yeah,
but
you're right.
But
he wrote
he didn't
2. Written
3 and 4. He's not. Yeah.
3 or 4. He's not involved. Then he wrote Nobody.
I like Nobody.
Movie.
He did. Yeah. So he wrote John Wick with a suburban scenario paint.
Nobody was intentionally John Wickish because it's him.
That's that premise with the new skin technique that Jamie we've talked about on the show before. So he did that with his own movie. I love it.
His own movie. Yeah.
And I know the same company made that movie. That's what are they 8711 David Leitch's company, who kind of co-directed the movie, but didn't get official credit, but was more second unit stunts, stuff like that on John Wick.
we're a writing podcast, but this movie did launch 2 very big directing careers too. Like, you know, both Chad Slesky and David Leitch are doing big movies now. This movie launched a lot of stuff.
It's awesome.
Yeah, like Violent Night was they just released that in 87-11. That was one of their, so they're doing kind of these original fun action movies and stuff like that. But then he went on, because I read an interview with him. He was on the writing staff of The Falcon and The Winter Soldier. He was on that staff. He did I think it was I don't know why. I think it was a Tubi thing that became a Roku thing, Die Hard. You know, the Kevin Hart, Die Hard thing.
Okay. Jamie, I just learned about it from doing this episode. I didn't even know it existed. I didn't know Die Hard was
see it on my Roku. It always pops up, and I'm always like, I need to watch that.
Same.
Well, now it's a series.
Takes over the Roku background.
Because there's a movie and a series according to IMDb. But
I'm kind of talking out of my butt, but I think it was a Tubi. You know, Roku picked up all the Tubi things and have repackaged them as movies.
Okay.
Because remember, Tubi was like 10-minute chunks. So if you add them all together, it's like one movie. You know, that's kind of the way. That was the dirty secret behind Tubi. Is like they were 2 hour and a half movies cut into 10-minute chunks, and they called it a season or something. It was kind of a goofy thing they did.
It was like studio stuff for TikTok generation. That's what like the implication was, right? Yeah.
But yeah. And so a lot of the Tubi stuff came over to Roku, and they just turned them into movies. And some of those that were popular now series, you know, they just said, well, we'll give it a season 2 or something. I think Kevin Hart's thing with that, but I could be wrong. I could be totally wrong about that. But I know they have.
We'll wait for the comments.
It's yeah. You can yell at us later because it's weird on IMDb. It's listed as a movie and then it's listed as a series. I was like, okay, so did he write a whole new series based on the movie or what? Okay, and I don't know.
And you know, sadly, it would only take me 2 seconds to Google Tubi.
Don't worry about it. It's fine.
I wouldn't find anything. But if not, I've just opened up a whole new door to people to Google Tubi series that are finally on Roku. So anyway, he sold the spec, and the spec eventually Keanu came on board, and his original spec was an older hero, you know, even older than Keanu. It was more like Clint Eastwood. It was more like Unforgiven or something, you know.
It was called Scorn, right?
It was called Scorn. And he has like a distant relative named John Wick. In fact, he has a relative. I don't know her career, but I know when I was researching him, he has a screenwriting relative named Laurie Wick, who I didn't look up. But apparently John Wick is his, you know, somewhere in his family, and he changed the name to John Wick. Because Keanu wanted a different name. I don't know what the original name of the character was, if he had a name. Here's the weird thing. There's a script online called Scorn, but the character's name has been changed to John Wick. So it must have kept that for a little while.
I looked at it for the podcast.
Yeah. And the script online has a lot of similarities and a lot of differences too.
Yeah, it's different.
It feels like it's 1 or 2 drafts away still from what it became.
There's a lot more John dialogue. A lot more.
Yeah. And I
did it have the world building that this is?
It did.
For?
Yes.
It did have that. It did have that. Yeah. And I think that's part of what makes his scripts kind of special sauce in some ways. And just the last thing I'd say about this script, in some ways it feels generic, and it does. You know, if I came up with this log line, so somebody kills his dog, so assassin goes on a killing spree to get, you know, it's like, I feel like that's not a huge concept. But I have to say that after John Wick came, and after Taken came out too, I mean, Taken's another movie. I'd say there are 3 movies that when I used to do Hollywood water bottle tours, which I haven't done since pre-COVID. Well, I guess I have, but I do them on Zoom now. They're a little different. There are 3 scripts that always come to mind that people used to hit me up with. One was Taken. When Taken everybody was like, we want the next Taken, whatever that, you know, and they'd use the term elevated action. And by the way, horror is a whole nother matter. They'd want the next Get Out elevated horror. So Taken was one. Another horror one that comes to mind is Don't Breathe. Everybody wanted the next Don't Breathe. They were like, if you have the next Don't Breathe, send it
They
to
just
us.
made Don't Breathe too.
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
And then the third one was John Wick. And I remember the year we were on the water bottle tour with John Wick, and everybody had a John Wick project. And 90% of the John Wick projects, you can almost guess what they were. John Wick with a woman. That was
Yeah.
It was like, the woman is a professional hitman, and it's Charlize Theron, and she goes on a killing spree. And there were 10 different ones, and they all got pitched. I think we were even bouncing around like, what if it was John Wick with a vampire, or something? Crazy stuff like that. You come up with goofy ideas, but there was something, and I think the advantage of a movie like John Wick, I think on spec, like I just went out with a spec, and people are getting bounced from it because it's very complicated. And it has an ensemble cast and things like that. And while I think it would work as a movie and it would make a really cool movie that people would like, I think it's hard to read a spec that has a big cast and has lots of ideas and jumps around a lot and stuff like that. Whereas I think when you come up with a simple idea like Taken, like John Wick, like Don't Breathe, where it's following like one or two characters, where you're following them step for step, where the goal is very clear, where it's something we've kind of seen before, and that's all it is. I think there's a major advantage to that on spec. It's like, save the creativity almost for like the execution,
Right.
and
Yeah.
and maybe hold back the creativity or complexity, conceptual level, and things like that. So I do think there's a big advantage to writing spec scripts sometimes that are just meat and potatoes, simple ideas.
You're saying at their core. Gotcha.
Now, there is another part of me that's like, would I have ever thought I could sell guy's dog gets killed and he goes on a killing spree, assassin? I don't know. I would have always been second guessing, like, that doesn't have enough irony. It doesn't have enough, it's not same but different enough.
It defies all our standard strategies for sure.
It does.
But the execution sells this, right?
Would I have thought Taken, which is, I think it's similar in a lot of ways. It's kind of like you screwed with the wrong guy, and now he's going to get you back. Would I have thought that would have been as big and defining as it was? Probably not. I would have talked myself out of it. I would have been like, yeah, it's not enough. It's just like, so what? A CIA agent is going to save his daughter. Who cares? We've seen that a million times.
Right.
But these movies definitely get elevated, and they're really what people want. It's really what the studios want. It's just, how do you jump through the hoops? How do you differentiate yourself from the other person that's pitching the same, assassin on a killing spree movie?
Yeah.
It always feels like adding all the world building is what really makes up for that.
I think that is a little bit of the special sauce, but you have to get deep into it before you even get that out of it.
Oh, the willy-nilly of the craft, is what carries you through. Everything gives it momentum. Yeah.
And honestly, I even read the script, so this is no judgment on the script, but this thing is, and it's the reason I love it. I said John Woo and all this other stuff. This is a stuntman's reel. This is a second unit director's reel is what this is. It's
both
like,
directors are stuntmen, right?
It's like they had a simple concept that teed them up to do what they love and they want to do best, and they killed it. And that's really, I think, why this movie
was the whole franchise
elevated.
Yes. It's the whole franchise. It's like them doing everything they've ever wanted to do their way.
That's awesome.
Where other directors might have screwed it up,
And not that we're talking about Taken, but because I brought it up, I used to always say that what's the difference between an elevated, action script and a non-elevated? I used to always say it's casting. You put Liam Neeson in it, and that was like the first time he did one of those, and he gives that speech, and it's like, oh man, Liam Neeson's doing this, And I think that's the difference. I think if I don't know, maybe Jean-Claude Van Damme could have done the same speech, and it would have been cool because he is kind of badass. But there's something about Liam Neeson doing it that makes it feel like it's, oh, this is like a real movie. This isn't like some, Golden Globus production or whatever, back in the day.
I was going to say, I love Van Damme, but if he did it, I don't think it would have been a cultural phenomenon for that speech. Like, that speech was everywhere.
Yeah, it was.
It still is.
It still is. It gets memified into new things.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Nick Cage started to do that movie, those kind of movies. I could kind of see him doing that speech. It would be kind of funny but serious in the same way. Like there would be some weird sense of Nick Cage irony to it.
He brings I think it's like you said, the star matters in this case. Like he brought a bit of class to what I think perceived as an action movie. You know what I mean? It's Liam Neeson doing that was odd at the time, right? Like he wasn't. He's the guy from Schindler's List. He's like what?
Right.
And he's doing that. It's weird.
He's also
that's why I used to always say
he's also Darkman. Correct. Absolutely.
I was always
I love Darkman.
That's why I always went back. Elevated is just casting. That's what I used to always say. I was like, it's casting. And
in this case, we got somebody who had worked with Keanu. They literally, I feel like this movie is wrapped around Keanu too.
Mm-hmm.
They worked with Keanu on The Matrix, and this is kind of their next project where they've been thinking about it for years, and they tailor it to him in execution, and everything.
No, here's the one thing kind of staying on this, the box office that.
Oh yeah, the box office, right?
Well, it kind of surprised me looking back on it. It was number 79. It only made $42 million. For some reason I thought this movie made a lot more money, and I'm sure it had a small budget, but it probably wasn't. Probably cost. I don't have the budget in front of me, but it's probably 10, 15, 20.
So was it not until the second one that it really became a huge franchise? And sort of like the later Fast and Furious movies, like.
Yeah, and that is domestic, so maybe it made a ton internationally. Yeah, maybe it made a ton internationally because it is an action movie, and it seems like it would be.
And there's not much dialogue, so yeah.
Right. So
it also, it's just the marketing was not very good, and it was a word of mouth hit. Right. It was the buzz around it.
It was a word of mouth hit. It really was.
Yeah. I just cannot stress how much I did not expect anything from it, and it's me and you guys. I've already on this show said how much I love Keanu, Bill and Ted, all that stuff. And I walked into this like,
Wikipedia has its budget at 20 to 30 million, and it has the total box office, so international, at 86. But that's still not a huge hit. They always say like 2.5 times makes it
surprising.
Back, yeah. So it wasn't like the massive hit that I sort of remember it being. Like I would have, if you would have asked me before this podcast, I would have said it made 86 million domestically, and then it probably made 160, 200 total box office. So I was a little surprised looking back that it only made 86. So with that said, I think we should end the podcast now because this is not a blockbuster.
It's not a blockbuster.
Yeah, we only talk blockbusters. Listen to our episode on Fargo.
And Pig.
Yeah, I was gonna say we've definitely not done blockbusters. Jamie, are there any dude with a problem notes for this one?
Dude. Right. So we were talking a little bit about genre with this one, and so genre in the Save the Cat way, and so let me give the quick primer on the thing. This is where Bob presses a button, press a button and plays recording.
Yeah, just pull back the pull string.
If you missed Jamie Nash talking about genre in the last episode, pay close attention. So Save the Cat has this. Save the Cat has this thing called genres, and in Save the Cat, genres are not like I would say blockbuster kind of genres, sci-fi, comedy. It's not those things. It's actually story patterns, is what he's talking about. So he's talking about the type of story you're telling. And we talked many times about monster in the house, which is the typical horror pattern that you see, which there's a monster. There's some kind of house someone's trapped in, be it metaphoric or be it, an actual house. And there's some kind of sin that brings the monster about. So it's a pattern. There's a battle for survival. Somebody's trapped in the house with the monster. There's a battle for survival. There's one called Golden Fleece, which we talked about, when we talk about sports movies, when we talk about quest movies. And the Golden Fleece is, there's some prize, there's some trophy, there's some kind of quest they're on, and when they have a road that they have to take to get there, and when they get to that road and they succeed in claiming the trophy, winning the trophy, finishing the quest, that's the end of the movie. So it's a golden fleece. We were kind of wondering what this movie was, and this is one area I tend to lump too many in the golden fleece category, and I just spoiler, I kind of put this in the golden fleece category. However, there's one other one that would, I think the gut reaction would be to put it in this section, and that's Dude with a Problem. Most action movies are Dude with a Problem. So Die Hard is Dude with a Problem. Now I'm blanking on every other action movie.
That's all you need to say.
Yeah,
it is the action movie.
Yeah, is it 3 Days of the Condor? Or is that the remake of 7
I love
Days?
that poll.
That's kind of the classic one
of all of cinema.
To me, that's like one of the originals. That North by Northwest, or like some of the original Dude with a Problem.
The reason I brought up Dude with a Problem is because there was a Save the Cat article that passed my feed during all of this research for the episode, and it labeled it Dude with a Problem. But
it doesn't surprise me, because almost it's kind of like how most horror movies end up monster in the house. But every now and then I'll nitpick that. Like I think when we talked about Nope, I was like, and as you see, I tend to lump things in the golden fleece, because I think.
So Jamie, what are the ingredients of a Dude with a Problem?
Dude with a Problem, right?
Yeah.
So the Dude with a Problem is an
or
innocent
Dudette.
Or Dudette, they call it, is an innocent hero that gets swept into a sudden scenario that becomes a battle for their life. So a life or death scenario. So an innocent hero gets swept into some battle for their life, and they have to fight, through their life. And that's where, for me, Dude with a Problem, because at any time, John Wick could get out of it. He's not really in a battle for his life.
Yeah, I don't think that tracks.
It does not.
Yeah.
No.
It does not.
Now,
he literally is asked by the villain to stop. He's like, you just have to stop. Yeah.
They're basically begging him to stop. In fact, the weird thing about this movie is, and we'll talk about this in a second.
He's a monster.
It's
they're
the
lying
reversal,
there with
right?
him.
Yeah.
We're following, it's kind of the opposite. It's like, oh crap, we did the wrong thing, and now we committed a sin. Now there's a monster in the house, and the monster is John Wick. So it's kind of like this opposite. And we're following the monster in some ways. We have our reasons, and we cheer for the monster because they're just going against worse people. But anyway, that's the only reason why
John Wick with like a retired Michael Myers would be something interesting. I'm just thinking.
You killed my dog. No, I'll kill you. Yeah. Puts the mask on.
Michael Myers has a dog now, and
Jason's retired. He's hanging out at the camp. He's playing catch with the dog. Somebody shoots it. It's on. But so anyway, that's the only reason I put it more in Golden Fleece, and I put like Kill Bill in Golden Fleece, and any kind of revenge kind of movie, because to me there's kind of a road you have to get through each of the people. Kind of there's like I don't know if it's a batting order or something. Yeah. And then at the end of the road, usually have to kill someone. Now, truth be told, he kills the father last, so in some ways he does get his real revenge earlier, but.
He does. It's at 77 minutes where he gets that revenge.
Technically
there's
speaking,
another 20 minutes before.
It's a new revenge.
It is new.
He kills William Dafoe.
Yeah.
And then it's like that's the new. Yeah. Or otherwise he wouldn't have touched the father, right? John Wick would have quit. Yeah.
It's a little bit of the this. You don't see this that often, but it does happen where the finale goal is sort of a change up from the original goal. So the original goal you pitch as the log line, like after he kills his dog, a man goes on a story, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes the finale is a different goal than the rest of the movie. And I think that's
the goalposts change. Yeah.
The goalposts change. So that's my only argument for Golden Fleece. And
I'm with you.
I'm with you.
I wouldn't go to bat for it.
The three of us
I wouldn't go to bat for it.
As you described it, it was obvious.
I mean, the reason we bring this up, so it's like if you're studying, if you're out there and you're like, I have this story, I'm trying to deliver, on the genre patterns. What are the genre patterns that I need to study to best like deliver the experience I'm going for with my concept? I think if you're doing a John Wick, now that you laid this out for us, Jamie, if you're doing something that's like John Wick with a new skin, golden fleece patterns are better brainstorming opportunities than like a dude with a problem, I think, based on what you're saying.
Yeah, it could be. It's really tricky with this one because I find the genre patterns so just like everything with Save the Cat, take it with a grain of salt. Whatever pulls the story out of you, if you the dude with the problem pulls it out of you, then great. I'm kind of.
But there is definitely a road, right? Like he's in a fucking car driving from place to place within the city world, within the John Wick story world, So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Like that tracks.
Much more,
he's truly to a crime family throughout the city.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And more so than say like than Die Hard, where it's kind of like
in a single location.
You know what?
But he has no choice in Die Hard. He has.
That's the key.
Right.
Die Hard is kind of reactive. You know what I mean? He's kind of on defense. This character is on offense.
Yep.
And I think that's where you end up with the Golden Fleece.
Okay.
A little bit.
Awesome.
John Wick could like get in a car and drive away mid-movie.
Yeah.
And would have been like, thank you. Yeah, they've been just like.
That was illuminating. This was illuminating.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jamie.
Actually, the one thing I learned, though, just from there is that if your character's on offense, it's probably a Golden Fleece because he's chasing a trophy. You know what I mean? He's chasing a goal.
That's a good.
And if they're on defense, then it's probably dude with a problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's almost built into the names of them, like Golden Fleece and dude with a problem, offense, defense.
Offense, defense. Yeah.
Very good. Well, that brings us. Let's talk about setup.
Yeah, Jamie, you popped this on there, so why don't you go and we'll take it away from there.
And I just want to do it really quick because we've done this many episodes and probably, I didn't do the breakdown that Jimmy would do or anything.
I didn't do it either.
Yeah. But I just wanted to mention that, and I think I saw that Derek Kolstad said he focused on the setup because he knew if he had the setup, you'd go with the movie. So he did like a focus pass on the setup. And I think this movie does two things really, really well. It hits it really hard, almost to the point where it's a little unconventional because it doesn't have a lot of action in the movie. They give you that little flash forward teaser, but it's kind of like the teasers I don't like too much. That don't really.
Me too.
They don't have any.
I was going to ask you what you guys thought of that, putting the end first.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan. It felt like just like they felt like they had to do it. Kind of thing.
It almost it feels like an editing decision where they had to tell you you're watching an action movie.
Yep.
Yeah, like a market research,
like a market research thing. It doesn't ruin anything for me.
It doesn't. It's so quick.
It's my least favorite thing about it, for sure.
Yeah, it's maybe my one criticism of it. And it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
But I did want to bring it up. I was curious what the two of you said. But anyway, go ahead, Jamie.
When I saw it, I'm like, this is the kind of thing I hate in scripts where they give me.
No, and in fact, Jamie, they immediately followed with a breakfast scene, which I thought I was like, oh shit, here comes a breakfast scene. But they do it in a really interesting way. It's the breakfast on the morning of the death of his wife's funeral. So that's a fresh breakfast scene. Yeah, there's an empty bowl and empty bed,
and even the teaser, at least he does bring up the video, so it kind of says, "Oh, what's this guy's deal?" You know what I mean? Right. He's in the middle of an action.
So that's true.
So
I'll say this: every time I watch it, though, I kind of wish it wasn't there, just so you would begin with his,
the loss,
because that whatever happens, you know that this is going to end, and badly because you saw what he's going to be later. So,
but again, it's a cheeseburger at its heart, and they probably did cheeseburger market research with all the audience, and they were like, "Well, I didn't like that for 20 minutes it wasn't an action movie." And so, like, the studio heads were like, "All right, we got to put something up there." Yeah,
I think if the directors had more of a name career by then, that wouldn't be there.
It wouldn't be there. Yeah, it feels off. Yeah. Go ahead, Jamie. Though.
No, sorry. Yeah. There is a part of me that says if you are an action screenwriter, you probably need to put something like that there. But maybe just something better. You know what I mean? I don't know what that is, but maybe something better.
Well, you want to open with something big, and that's
as
the
a,
action
as a
movie. So
as a spec writer, you really do have to grab their attention so early.
Yeah, and it
Like,
would be
say,
it is
"Oh,
unconventional that like it would be starting with him waking up morning.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth, but if
Don't
I'm
do
sure
this.
Yeah.
But do it.
I don't like the scene, but you should probably do it or something like it.
it's probably an editing
Like all the great
decision,
teachers, Jamie.
You guys read the script. Was it in the script like that?
No,
Man,
no.
I can't remember. I don't think
It's
so.
an editing decision then. It was an editing thing.
Now, the script is that we read online is different.
It's different.
It has different stuff. It doesn't have that whole series of flashbacks that it goes into, like that little montage, that flashback montage. So it more starts like it starts after the funeral in some ways, like a little after the funeral, and the dog shows up at the door, and it's kind of like there's a note that says, if you get this dog, it means I didn't survive my surgery. It's kind of that type of deal. And it starts with him crying and stuff like that. So you're wondering, why is this guy crying? What's he so sad about and things like that. But that's my point with the only thing I wanted to say is that this focuses on two big things, in my opinion. And really, there's the rooting resume here is totally present. He loves a dog. He's kind of nice with it. He's an underdog. He's sad about his wife. It gets you on the boogeyman side. So if we made our Jason
we don't know he's the boogeyman.
Yep, the world has treated him unfairly, as that's one of your boxes. Yeah,
it does a good job of not letting you know what he's capable of at all before.
Right.
No, and the second time that around, I was sort of struck by his. I know I think it shows his grief, his restraint when those guys are beating him, considering what we see that he's capable of after. Like, he could have just absolutely obliterated them, but he just like let himself be beat, It's very interesting in the rewatch in that scene. Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah. And even small things like Willem Dafoe cares about him, you know what I mean? And stuff like that. Stuff like that helps. And so his sadness, his vulnerability, caring for the dog, the kind of fun parts with the dog, kind of giving him a sense of humor. Plus, it's Keanu, which helps because he's charismatic in general. We have a lot of goodwill toward Keanu when we see him. So casting does play a part in these things. So all of that, they spend the whole 10 minutes doing that. You know what I mean? It's like, that's all we care about for these 10 minutes. We're not going to give you mystery. We're not going to give you intrigue. We're just going to give you 10 minutes of why you should like this guy and what his life is like. The things that need fixing are kind of baked into that cake. And mostly it's just sadness and grief in this scenario. There's not a lot of other things that are going on, but it is baked into the cake. So my point always is, because I can't tell you how many screenwriters, when I do consulting work, which isn't as much as Jimmy, but I occasionally do it. I can't tell you how often people skip over the setup and don't do any of it when that's all they should be doing, or that should be the number one most important thing. Like, that should be on the top of the list, is rooting resume, things that need fixing. Like, that should be the top. Like, you should be like, ugh. And
Agreed.
then introducing Ordinary World and stuff like that should be the other things that more naturally flow.
Yeah, agreed.
So just pointing it out that even this movie hits that really, really, really
hard.
I feel like as many times as we brought up rooting resumes, it's always like nice to animals, and I think about John Wick. This is like whenever you say it on the show, I always think John Wick.
The whole thing is centered around that. Yeah.
Right. I mean, like, you're rooting for the guy who had the dog,
who was nice,
puppy.
But there's an extra layer to it that the dog is like
represents the love of his life.
And the hope of a future where he could love again and all that.
It's not really about his dog. It's not really about the dog.
The dog is representative of so much for him. It's the retirement. It's the
The term "save the cat," came from an old era when that was actually the term for, like, hey, you saved a cat. But I think another term that gets interchangeably used is "pet the dog" was what they used to call it. It's just like, if you're nice to a dog, you got to be a nice person. If the dog likes you and you like the dog, we'll root for you.
Save the cat always makes me think of the scene in Superman the movie when he saves the cat. That's that's what I always think about.
It's kind of hilarious because my Google alerts usually go nuts because every other week there's some movie that literally saves a cat. I think people are almost doing it as a wink now, but
I mean,
everybody's like, "Oh, I
made
can't
a
believe."
movie,
Yeah,
where they save a cat, like on purpose as the joke.
Yeah.
So, named Keanu, by the way.
I just want to add 2 takeaways from the setup for me that aren't on the talking points, but I just think are like, upon rewatch, like as far as exposition goes, this is like a great example of, it's sort of the opposite of what a lot of movies do, in that like there is great power in withholding information.
Yeah.
Like the amount of information that is withheld is so extreme. Like we know him intimately, but we really don't know anything about him. We somehow simultaneously know him like as intimately as we possibly could, and also nothing about his history, right? And that like creates this urgency and tension to know more as soon as possible. And so you have you're hungry for more information about him, and that gives it momentum just in itself, that desire to know more. And then the second thing is like the setup. And when I'm saying the setup, I'm saying the first 16 minutes, like to the point when the guy kills his dog. When they kill his dog, the whole setup that ends. That's 16 minutes, and that promises this collision, this confrontation. I think that I love when writers do this thing where they like the whole thing is built upon like relationships eventually colliding, right? 2 people coming to a confrontation, and it gives it this sense of momentum. Like we are waiting for that moment when these 2 people are going to meet and it's going to collide again. And the whole movie is like built around those collisions, So anyway, those are 2 things that like I was struck by the second time watching this that I thought were really instructive. Yeah.
Also, what's the name? Is it anti-rooting influencer, or what was the name for the opposite?
We just talk about how sometimes where you make a character fresh is when you invert what are typically our rooting influencers. When someone does the opposite in certain categories that where we're usually on board with a person because like they're the smartest person in the room, and like we said with Rocky, the last episode, Rocky's the least intelligent person in the room, so that it makes him very interesting and complex in that way. Yeah.
Well, I meant for like villains. I meant like in this case, this is the exact opposite.
Kills the dog.
He kills the dog. Yeah. The audience wants nothing more than his demise.
Right. You get all of those inverts of the whole 15 minutes of rooting influencers for John. Yeah, good call.
You could do it. You could do a list on just that character, on
that guy,
on the son.
Yeah,
just how awful he is.
Is it Yosef? Is that how you say it? IOSEF. Yeah.
Spoiled, stupid, just
yes, least intelligent person in the room. Yes.
Right. He's not even a good criminal. Like he's bad at what he even wants to be. Right. Yeah. Like
he's just shitty all around.
He's shitty all around. Okay, let's talk about John's goal, reward, and stakes.
Yeah, I brought this up, Jamie, because I think your typical ingredients, and you sort of talked about this earlier when you were talking about how it's different in that way. It doesn't give us your standard cheeseburger ingredients in that way. Am I right about that?
I think it does. I think the stakes are where it throws it off.
That's what I mean. I'm sorry. The goal is the cheeseburger goal, but the reward and stakes are sort of abstract.
But I think
until John feels like he has what he wants, right?
We've talked about this before, I think, or maybe Jimmy and I talked about it. There's one weird cheat code that I think cheeseburger movies do have that is off the cheeseburger. It's like maybe it's the special sauce. We'll call it the special sauce for now. But vengeance is a weird stakes that I think the cheeseburger audience understands. But the reason it's different is because usually the way we measure stakes is that why can't the person quit? Why, what is it? What's life or death?
He's going to explode or something.
Exactly.
The example we've used in the past is for example, Star Wars, the goal is to destroy the Death Star. Reward is saving millions of lives and ending fascism, like galactic fascism.
Right.
And then the stakes is the fascists rule the galaxy and enslave and kill millions, you know. So that's like your standard cheeseburger. But this one, it's like the stakes are vengeance, like you said, right? Like,
and I think I always chalk vengeance up to kind of a personal code. You know, it's like it is kind of a code that they have, but this one definitely has that.
I did want to ask, like, do you think involve like so typically, like when I'm reading scripts and I'm sort of figuring out on the fly here with you guys, when I'm reading scripts, people sort of often confuse what the goal is, which is the filmable action, like you said, Jamie, the photo finish. So the photo finish is killing the guys who killed his dog. We can see that. We can picture that. You can draw that, right? That's your exercise, Jamie.
Mm-hmm.
But the stake. But people often will describe their goal as actually like the stakes, right, or the reward. Right. But here, like, I think losing his peace, his retired, like getting back in the violent killing game, I think is somewhere in this recipe too. And I'm like, maybe that's the stakes and the reward is vengeance. I don't know. Like what he's trying to gain is vengeance, but what he stands to lose is he was retired, he was at peace, and if he seeks vengeance, now he's back in the killing game forever, basically. And the whole movie is sort of
Ian McShane sort of defines it in the script, right? Like he literally says, if you dip your toe back in.
Yeah, what does he say? I have this for later, but have you thought this through? You got out once, you dip so much as a pinky back into this pond, you may well find something reaches out and drags you back into its depth.
That is somewhat.
That could be the stakes, right? Which is also abstract.
Yeah, it is.
My only thing is, I don't think that's the stakes so much as that's like the theme or the arc. Yeah,
okay, so that's I got you. Gotcha.
Because
so that's the wrong way. Yeah.
Exactly. Like I feel like in some ways it's a tragedy.
It's a tragedy. Yeah, it absolutely.
In some ways, his code leads him down that wrong path, and he does an arc because of his code. But so here's just another way I try to do hero goal obstacle stakes, which I've said before. And this is where it kind of is obvious why vengeance feels weird, right? So will the hero achieve the goal or will the horrible thing happen? And in this case, the horrible thing is he won't get his vengeance, you know?
Right.
Yeah. The horrible thing already happened.
Yeah.
The horrible thing already happened when it's the reason for the story.
The dog killer goes free.
Now, the way I would respin this a little bit is, will justice not be served? And maybe that is a horrible thing that could happen. These guys get away with
justice. So justice are the stakes. So stakes are cinematic justice. I'm writing that down.
I think so. I think that's the way to spin it to make it feel
when
better.
We go into the Terminator talk, I think this supports some of the stuff.
Some of that stuff,
it's a good point.
So justice is the stakes,
He's on a mission we agree with. You know what I mean? And that's where the justice comes. Yeah, where vengeance.
There's a cinematic rule, right? Yeah, I have this for later with the Terminator, but it's basically like, and we can talk about it at length more there. But it's basically like there are different rules in life than there are in movies. In life, you wouldn't necessarily want to wish death on a criminal. In movies, when that's what the movie's about, there's like an equation that like creates justice, a need for justice in cinema, and in these types of interventions movies, the characters that they're hunting we perceive as deserving this justice, right? So he is an executioner. We want that judgment, we want that justice. Yes, that's good. I love that.
And it would get muddy if, let's say, the guys were really apologetic after this, then it would get muddy, right?
Then it would get weird.
Man, we really, oh my God, John Wick, I'm so sorry we did this to you. How can we make this right? And
if they were penitent, yes, especially like in the church. Oh my God, if there was a church scene and they were like on their knees, like, saying we did wrong, about I could have.
We get a little taste of that from the father, right? Like
we do
a little taste of it.
A little bit.
That's why it's a complicated, meaningful choice for him to keep going. Yes, with his vengeance, because they make him question it. Yes. Yeah, my question. So I had 2 questions for you, but we sort of answered it. For this was for you guys both because I don't have the answer, which is like, see, from a writing standpoint, from an educational standpoint, and like taking this and doing things further. Like, when do you think this is the only time? This is the only type of genre, like the vengeance movie, where abstract stakes work for a cheeseburger experience. Most of the time when the stakes, you can't film them, it doesn't make for a compelling story. So I wanted to know, given everything, what you guys think of that.
I feel like there's got to be successful comedy movies that have the same type of abstract goal.
That's what I was going to ask. Does it depend on the genre?
There's one that pops into my head right away. There's one that pops into my head right away. And I can't think of the movie, so I'm going to give you the stakes, and maybe you can help me with the movie. But somebody that gets it, maybe it's Rocky in some ways. Somebody that gets their shot at the dream, or something like that. I mean, Rocky isn't exactly, because specifically the stakes are losing that moment or not living up. But if somebody has a huge dream in their life and they get their shot at it, and in some ways,
stakes of their dream, their
stakes of their dream, it's kind of abstract in a weird sort of way, right?
Yeah,
because it's a little looser.
It's filmable, but it's loose, like you said. Yeah, that's a good example. Right. So maybe it just depends on the genre, depends on the theme. Yeah, I don't know. It's funny how we just, there's always these. I think it's a good example that, like, quote unquote rules, there's always exceptions, right? You don't have to have stakes and reward that are filmable and concrete. They could be abstract and work.
Sometimes it's internal stakes. That's what the dream one would be. That's what the vengeance. They're kind of internal stakes. And when I'm approached with somebody and they pitch me internal stakes, I usually try to wrestle it out of them a little bit.
Yep.
I try to is there a way we can do it? And if they really can't, or if it's really messing up their story, I'm like, you can make it work, but I try to wrestle with them. And I would suggest, if you have similar, don't stick with the first draft. Try to wrestle it out of yourself.
You mean to wrestle it out externally to make it filmable?
To make it more filmable? Is that what you mean?
Make it more filmable. Try. Try.
Yeah, try.
But I'm a big fan of test your, you know what I mean? Like, let's say you're coming up with something that's experimental or something different or something that doesn't quite fit. I'm a big fan of testing it. And the best way to test it is to pretend like it's wrong. And try to come up with something different. Like, if you have a good idea, come up with 10 more ideas. And then if you still like it, stick with your first idea. And that's what I think.
Yeah.
That's what I think. Like, if you have those loose internal stakes, test it.
Yeah.
Pretend
they're a lot harder to pull off, is basically why it's.
I'm still trying to brainstorm, in my brain. I'm trying to think of a good examples of this. I'm trying to think of movies where somebody has to put on a great show or something like that. You know what I mean? Where it's filmable, but it's not that important.
It's loose. Yeah.
It's loose as hell. Yeah.
What that is.
Dream, where their dream comes true, but it's
dream is a good generalization of the reward and stakes that can be abstract.
John Wick has to be satisfied with the resolution.
Yeah,
so
satisfaction. But we go what is satisfaction? What does that look like? And
is it the Muppets putting on a play? Right.
Yeah. How can the audience measure this?
Yeah.
In order to feel what we want them to feel.
The weird thing about John Wick is, and I think this is why it's 100% still a cheeseburger, is we totally understand this kind of Western code of
100%. It's in the code of a Western story. Absolutely.
We don't have to
neo-noir version of that. Yes. Yeah.
We don't have to do any psychological math.
And that's what I mean. That's why I brought up the question, because it's not hard to connect with. Inherent to vengeance stories, the vengeance, subgenre, the vengeance stakes are always, they're easy to connect with. We're aware. Yeah. We don't have to do any heavy lifting. Yeah. We know what's going on. Yeah.
One of the most straightforward setups ever, maybe.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Really
and to that,
to that, yeah, that was my transition. the payback vengeance clock. What is
yes? So I
is?
thought this was a good. The only time we talked about this was on the Pig episode, and it was because Pig is an intentional subversion of this whole movie. So I wanted to bring it up again. Typically we talk about we just talked about the goal reward stakes, recipe. Usually on top of that recipe, in order to create like an engaging experience, there's a deadline to achieve all of these things, right? Like I don't want to go heavily into it, but like there's the big five. I haven't come up with a catchy name for it, but it's goal, obstacles, reward, stakes, urgency. Urgency comes at the bottom, and that is, how do you create urgency? Well, there's a deadline that impacts the goal, reward, stakes, and obstacles that creates urgency for all of this stuff. But there are certain genres and there are certain scenarios where there is no clock, and yet there's urgency the entire time. So like when we've been looking at these movies where there is no clock, like on the inverse, like I'll give you a couple examples. Mission Impossible 6, your standard arc plot cheeseburger. When
everything's going to explode.
Everything. And there's never ending new clocks, right?
Right,
and updates and changes to the urgency, pauses that slow down the clock. The clock speeds up, all these things, right? When we did that episode, there were over 30 deadline updates where we got new clock updates, right? And in Little Miss Sunshine, a mini plot, right? So it's not your standard cheeseburger. It's in between the experimental and the arc plot. There were 14 deadline updates to get to the pageant. She has to get to the pageant by the end. And so it's a race to get to the pageant. So there's like still ever-present urgency in this indie story. In Pig, we never get a single update about the pig's whereabouts or whether it's alive until he finds out it's dead. There's literally no clock the entire time. So
it's almost thematic.
So the complete absence of a clock creates somehow this ever-present urgency. So like I was thinking that I think it's because, Jamie, like you said, the bad thing happens usually is the stakes. But since the bad thing has already happened and we want justice for it, every second that passes where justice is not served creates this sense of urgency and tension for justice to be served. Justice is sort of creating the momentum and urgency. So I just think the payback clock is very unique, and it's just something I never noticed before we broke down like these types of movies. So this one I definitely think has a payback clock, right? You want him to get that guy like the entire time. That's what's driving the tension and urgency the entire time. So anyway, I'm sure
I know this isn't exactly what you're saying, Jimmy, but also like if he's the monster, the people he is aiming at also do fight back, and I do believe that does create.
There's other clocks, yeah. That's
I'm just saying, like there is a retaliation for his action.
The retaliation does create its own deadline. Like, that's true.
After he goes to a certain degree, like they're trying to kill him no matter what.
Yeah,
like, they want John Wick dead.
Like, how many men do you have? As many as it takes, And
that's the whole dipping your pinky toe in.
Yeah.
Thing. He already opened the Pandora's box, so that's the clock, sort of, right?
There is a clock on the villain side. Yeah,
he needs, and also he puts the hit out on him and stuff. Like,
that's a good call. Reward. So there is a clock. That's true. Is that, but as far as his mission,
right? Yes,
his goal, reward, stakes. There is no deadline.
He could kill him in 10 years.
Because right. And I think there's urgency somehow. I think there's with the payback clock. There's never ending urgency, and you don't even need to ever give us like a deadline with it. I think it's an interesting subversion of your standard. Like, we need a clock, we need a deadline, like how much time is left on the clock is like such built into your standard arc plot Hollywood movie, except when it comes to payback movies.
The clock is his own pain to get it over with.
Yep.
Right?
100%.
Kill Bill is another one I think of like that, because she really has all the time in the world. She's just dropping in on people. It's kind of a thing.
But we are rooting for her. We feel every second that goes by while she's training, it's like, when are we going to get to that confrontation? Right? Yeah.
Right.
So yeah.
protagonist of few words.
Yes.
I love this.
God.
Yeah.
So this is
this your point?
This is
Jimmy?
my point. So it came up only once in the pig episode, and I wanted to bring it up again because I think this is sort of a built-in genre expectation for your hero in a vengeance story, right? And so, like, I'll name John Wick, the Dollars trilogy, Man with No Name, The Bride barely talks, Eric Draven in The Crow almost says nothing, Dwight in Blue Ruin almost says nothing. Like, if you have a vengeance story, it comes along with having a protagonist that doesn't talk, really.
To compare it to, think of Die Hard. We just talked about Dude with a Problem. He's got the gift of gab. He really does, right?
Yeah,
like the exact opposite. Right?
Yes. So it's just interesting, and so to that point, when you have a character, and I don't have the exact numbers, but Bob, you were talking about how in John Wick 4, there's like no dialogue, right?
Yeah, well, somebody counted. It was like 280, 300 words that Keanu might even say.
Yeah, John Wick says something, yeah.
I've seen the movie, and talking it's like somebody lovingly made a supercut of the whole franchise of Keanu saying, yeah. And he does. He just he answers questions and throughout the whole franchise, not just this movie, with yes and no, basically. He doesn't. Yeah, he's not a verbal character whatsoever. It's almost it puts us in his quest more.
It somehow creates more intimacy.
He's a surrogate. He becomes a surrogate for our emotions.
Surrogate, yes. The audience surrogate factor increases.
It's huge
because he doesn't say anything. Yeah, but
the casting's important there too. Like Jamie said,
important. And I'm sure on the page they do a little extra heavy lifting with the internals coming out on the page, which is fine. And if it works to make things clear. But I wanted to say so with that, when you have a character who doesn't speak, then you have to have other people speak about him. Because there's a technique called a window character, and I learned this from Jack Epps Jr., the writer of I just mentioned him on the last episode, the writer of Top Gun, Dick Tracy, Anaconda, Secret to My Success, Legal Eagles. He has this term called window characters, and the idea behind this, not just in protagonists who say a few words, but in all movies, supporting characters, they can have their own little mini storylines. They can have their own agency and their own goals and this and that. But ultimately, their purpose and function in a story, if you're telling like an arc plot story, if you're telling an indie one or an ensemble, it's different. But in your standard arc plot Hollywood stories, every supporting character's main function is to give you a window into your hero. And that's how you learn about their past. That's how you learn about how they're feeling in the current situation, about the progression or the setbacks that are happening toward their agenda, their goals. And for instance, in Die Hard, most of what we learn about John is through Al on the phone and even Argyle, like all that backstory. We get a ton of backstory through his jovial comment. Argyle's like, "Hey man, how's it going?" And then we learn a shit ton of information about John.
It shows us who he is with people instead of just shooting.
People. Right. Yeah. So window characters are really important in giving us an idea of who your character is, and again, and how they're feeling about the situation unfolding. So this movie has 5. Every single character teaches you something about John based on their response to the idea of him. Like when somebody brings it up, like John Leguizamo's character, the amount of respect and fear that comes into his face without even saying his name, just by knowing whose car that is standing in front of him. But there's 5 great examples specifically of how we learn about John through the other character's voice. Winston at the table, that little line that we just said earlier, he's like, "Have you thought this through?" Right? So we're getting some internals there from John just through this. Have you thought this through? chewed this to the bone. You got out once, you dip so much as a pinky back in this pond, you may well find something reaches out and drags you back into its depths. Having other characters debate the agenda with your hero is a great way to show how your hero responds and to get into their heads without them just saying, I'm really scared right now, or I'm really upset about this, or I'm having second thoughts. How you make that happen is you have other characters challenge them. And another one is the bartender. That simple little exchange is so powerful. Like, they're old friends. He's back at the bar and she says, I've never seen you like this. And he says, like what? And she says, vulnerable. That exchange, man, it's so good.
Yeah.
Vigo the villain, every single thing that comes out of his mouth is like a window into John and his we learn mostly everything about John's past through Vigo and what he has to say about John.
That phone call.
Oh my god,
so good. Yeah.
That's like the essence. That's a window character in action right there. That phone call. Marcus, his assassin friend, he says, "You look terrible." "No, I look retired. It's been a while." Right. We learn a lot right there. My condolences. How are you holding up? You have a character asking your hero how they feel. That way, your character is forced to say something that clues us into their emotional state. And then the last one, my favorite one. This is my favorite one on the list. In the beginning of the Miss Perkins fight, the woman assassin at the hotel, he's going easy on her at the start of the fight. He pulls a punch. And she says, "You always were a pussy." And then she gets the upper hand. Because, like, before that, he's been shown to avoid any violence against women. And then in this moment, a woman is attacking him. He still has a bit of hesitation. And then she's like, "You always were a pussy." Right? So it just, like, here we have a reflection of him who's confirming, yes, like, typically he's a softie when it comes to, women and children. So anyway, I just thought that this movie is a great example, since we have a character who doesn't speak, of how to use other characters to get into your character's head. Yeah. So yeah.
And that's a perfect segue.
You can talk about this, Bob, because you wanted to bring it up.
I don't know the origins. I feel like you guys know the origins of the term. I
can tell the origins, and then you can talk about the speech.
Well, talking about window characters. Talking about Vigo, it brings us perfectly into the praise of the killer speech we've talked about before. Right. Can you tell people where that came from? What that means?
So this is a term that I got from taking a Robert McKee thriller seminar. It was a seminar specifically about Seven. So he didn't invent the concept, but he codified it, and we've noticed it in like every horror movie and in other genres, because it works in comedies too. Like, you have
in most cheeseburgers.
It works in everything, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is you have a character. Usually, it's the half-man character who has experienced the monster or experienced whoever the intimidating character is being spoken about. It's a speech that praises the power of the monster, so that when we finally see the monster, we have this built-in gravitas and fear. It like makes them more powerful by having other people who have experienced the monster share their experience. So like, there's so many famous ones in cinema.
I was going to say Jaws and Terminator, right?
Quentin Jaws, Kyle Reese in Terminator, Dr. Loomis in Halloween. Right, he says, "I met him 15 years ago. I was told there was nothing left, no reason, no conscience, no understanding, and even the most rudimentary sense of good or evil, right or wrong. I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then the other 7 trying to keep him locked up, because I realized that what was living behind this boy's eyes was purely and simply evil." I mean, that is like, that's
you can apply that to the Russian mobs, saying this about John, just saying it's just, you just change up what he says.
Exactly.
He's a man of focus.
And that's,
that's kind of what, and we're going to talk a little bit about John Wick as the Terminator, but imagine if, the speech was, John Wick is out there. He can't be bargained with. He can't be reasoned with. He doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear. And absolutely He will
It's
not
almost all
stop
true.
ever until you are dead. Yeah.
It's
literally all true. It tracks, man. It tracks. Yeah, it all works.
So what was unconventional and unique about this movie is that we're not used to hearing someone else give a praise of the killer speech about our hero,
for our protagonist. Yeah.
It's really cool and fresh. It's extra special because of that. Because we all know that trope. We all know the speech. We recognize it, and we're like, "Oh shit, it's about John." Like,
it also gives us a little glimpse at the movie before the movie.
Yes.
Like whatever that impossible task was.
Movie, yes.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, it's just like it's maybe not so much writing, but the execution of this one is so well done. It's stuck in my head for 10 years. Whenever we've talked about it on the show, I think about it.
Yeah, they made him out to be Kaiser Soze. Right.
He's the shark from Jaws. He's the Terminator.
Yeah. But without that speech, without that technique being put into use, we wouldn't feel that way. Without Baba Yaga. Yeah.
No, I would say like I've already said, going to see this movie, no expectations. That moment is when I fell in love.
That's awesome.
I mean, it is when you fall in love with the movie, when you're like, okay, this is something a little bit different. This has a little bit of special, as Jamie said, special sauce on the top. You know what I mean? Like that's where it starts to have a voice in the script, in my opinion. But I mean, did you have anything more to say about him being the Terminator, Jamie?
Yeah.
Only what, why does it work? Because usually we see the Terminator on the other end, and we put,
right.
If we have a hero that seems like he won't stop, he can't stop, you can't defeat him, he's that great. How do you make that work? Because it's rare that you see that. I can imagine Batman in some ways is kind of like that sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, he's sort of driven by vengeance abstractly. Yeah.
And I mean, it's a tricky thing, because if you make the Terminator the good guy and be like, yeah, he can't stop, you can't kill him, and it'll be impossible to find a way. And you don't give him like kryptonite or something that really is a weakness. Now, he is a human in this case, so he does have a weakness that he could be killed.
He is saved by someone else during the movie, like
a couple times.
Yeah. I had never thought of this before you put it on the talking points. I have an answer, and I think it builds off. Let's see what you guys think.
Yeah.
I think it builds off what we were talking about with the stakes, which is, besides the things that need fixing in that rooting resume part of this question, and besides the fact that Terminator is a machine and, like you said, John is a human, he's still killing so many people. I don't know what the body count is in John Wick 1, but it's got to be at least 40. And so, it's a great question. Like, why does it work that watching this guy just mercilessly kill like 40 people, and we want that to happen? And I think it is because it's that cinematic justice factor, right? Like, there's a language in cinema where people, like, we root for cinematic justice for them. And the Terminator, he's killing people who have never done anything to him. He's killing people who are completely innocent. And the backstory is that, like, he's trying to kill John Connor, who, like, kills a bunch of machines in the future, but that's not happening on screen. That's not dramatized. We can't, like, feel things about that in the moment. So basically what I'm saying is, like, Terminator is not a judge or a jury. He's just an executioner. Whereas John, go ahead, Bob.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Finish.
Whereas John Wick, he's only killing people we've seen hurt him or help others hurt him or trying to hurt him. Like, all those action scenes, the way that it's blocked is he's only killing people who are on the attack. And, like, if he's not killing someone on the attack, if he's sneaking up, it's because they're like the assistant complicit to whoever the attacker is that he's helping. So he's like a judge, jury, and executioner of cinematic justice. Whereas, like, the Terminator is just an executioner.
Sure. I was going to say, too, like, in this specific movie, because of John Wick 4, I've had a couple of John Wick discussions with people in the past 2 weeks. And 2 of those people have literally said John Wick didn't go hard enough.
Wow.
Because, I mean, I'm just saying, to play on the emotions of that setup, some people are like, they should have gotten it worse.
Damn.
Just simply, I literally had a friend the other day who said simply shooting the guy who killed the dog was not enough. Like they want an all-out torture scene to, like, you know what I mean? Like,
I did think it was, I did feel like when
it's almost merciful. It's almost merciful.
So that first kill where he's like, "You killed my dog, you stole my car, you killed my dog," which I also love that he doesn't do vanquishing lines.
Yeah,
like that's also a subversive thing about this movie. He's the anti-Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jean-Claude Van Damme in these situations. No vanquishing lines. He literally says,
"Stick around." None of that.
He either says nothing. Exactly. Which I love. Stick around.
Oh, yeah, no, I love that.
Vanquishing lines are my favorite type of dialogue.
Let off some steam.
Yeah.
Bennett,
right. So it was like a subversion.
Bennett.
Yeah.
So it's a subversion to have him not say anything. But I also think, like, to your point, Bob, it felt like they were dramatizing that, like his mercy, like that it was a meaningful choice that he didn't go harder.
That's a little bit of the rooting thing, right? Like John Wick, I don't think he likes killing people. He doesn't.
He has mercy. Yeah,
he has mercy. He doesn't relish in the violence. He's doing what he has to.
Right.
But I don't think he actually loves it.
I think his mercy is measurable, dude. It's absolutely measurable. Yeah.
He would literally, Thanos snap them away if he could.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't have to go through with all this.
Yeah.
He's very. But I literally have friends who, like, they wanted to see a torture scene. Like,
yep,
it's a different movie. It's a different character.
And the thing is, the circus mirror, Vigo would torture them.
Absolutely.
And that's the difference between them.
I mean, Vigo did torture John basically in that scene. I mean, that's somewhat torture, right?
And he tortures Marcus.
Right.
So that's a great way to contrast those two.
Right.
Yeah. Mercy versus merciless. Yeah. Wow. Love that.
And,
I'm learning a couple things from the movie.
I even think strangely in John Wick, like, why it works is because despite this praise of the killer speech, despite the fact that there's something about the casting of Keanu mixed with the opening that we do feel like he's not that great. You know what I mean? Not that he's a schlub, but he could, when going against an army, he could be hurt. Or
we're meeting him in the retirement phase, right?
You know what I was thinking? I was thinking too, like, they do give you like kind of a timeline. Like, he hasn't been working for 5 years ish. I think that's where it is. And I was thinking, like, everything we've seen of John Wick of the 4 movies happens in, like, 2 weeks.
Yep.
And I was like, this is him not having prepared or exercised for 5 years, and then he does all this stuff. I was like, man, can you imagine the old days? Like,
the
must have been the actual Terminator, man. He must have been his younger days. Oh my god.
And I think so. To that point, I think the fact that they kill his dog, and they get the better of him early, shows you that he's vulnerable.
Right? It does.
Like, the Terminator wouldn't let you kill his dog. The real Terminator. It just wouldn't happen. But this guy allowed people to sneak up on him and get the better of him. They could have killed him.
There's an embarrassment factor.
No, he got soft, but the softness is what we want. We want for him. Right? So I do think, even though, despite the praise of the killer, despite what we see on screen, him taking out armies, basically, he is. There is at least initially a sense that he is vulnerable, or he is now. There is and she does say, when she says to him, "You're vulnerable." I mean, that kind of is the different thing she's saying, but at the same time, I do think there is truth to that we feel that because of Keanu, because of the opening, because it's a validation really of something we've felt.
Right. And this type of character isn't completely new because, we mentioned Commando. Commando is a killing machine that nobody can stop, superhero, much more even than Keanu is in some ways.
There's endless examples of it.
I think when you put Arnold in that role, and Rambo eventually became that too.
In
a lot of ways, not in the first movie necessarily, but in the second,
not at all. Actually, in the first movie, he is a protagonist of few words. Yep, that's a good call.
Yep.
Once again, that goes along with the vengeance.
It's a different movie, but John Wick starring Arnold is a very different movie. It's a very different movie.
It's kind of like,
right. Like, you wouldn't be able to really. It'd be a little bit. It have to be more levity and stuff. It would,
Well, it's kind of like Taken is Commando. reimagined in some ways.
It really is.
So
Yeah.
it is different.
So speaking of, we're mentioning Commando and Taken. Let's talk about structuring action scenes, like just the action genre and John Wick. Whose point
This
was
is
this?
Jamie's.
This is
Jamie?
This is mine. And the one thing I wanted to mention about this movie, because when I see writing from action writers who are kind of new to it, sometimes I'll see scenes where it literally is John Wick shoots 5 guys, he blasts a guy in the face, he kicks a guy in the nuts, he karate chops a guy in the throat, he wins, the end.
Right.
It's kind of like that. And here's the weird thing about this movie. This movie is kind of like that. Like normally I hate that writing. Like I'm like, give me some reversals.
There's not a lot of bad news.
Wrong.
There is some bad news though.
There's some. It's
look
a
at
lot.
that club fight.
Good news, bad news. Yeah.
The club fight has a lot of good news.
There's occasional.
I almost tracked it for the episode.
Oh man, that would have been great.
Yeah, I mean, it's so you don't really. I think tracking it would be boring in the case of this movie.
It's
but
not like indie.
He gets the shit beat out of him in this movie like 3 times.
I agree completely.
Sure.
Yeah,
he's not an immortal. Yeah,
no,
yeah.
But I hear you, Jamie, too.
Yeah, I hear Jamie saying though. Yeah,
I think the fun of it. So then you ask, well, what's the fun of it? Because usually that's the fun of watching like James Bond in a fight. James Bond's kind of like a killing machine too, in his own weird way. He just has a different technique. It's not so much punches and gunshots. He's just clever. He's super clever at figuring things out. Maybe not Daniel Craig James Bond, but at least sometimes, but it's less killing machine and more cleverness. But I kind of think that's what the fun of this is this is a script that's teed up for 2 second unit directors who are going to bring every creative instinct and wild thing they wanted to do, into fruition, and I think that's the cleverness of it. So seeing him behind my favorite scene in that club scene is when he's behind the pole and he looks down, shoots the guy in the foot, and the guy's like, "Ow," and then he shoots him, and then it's just it's kind of clever. It's like something we would never see. It's funny.
It's comedic. It is comedic.
And it's kind of like when Indiana Jones pulled the gun on the guy with the sword, like, oh yeah, that's all you got to do. You don't have to get in a big fight with him. You just shoot him in the foot. Then, if his
as silly as it is, there's a realness to the fact that he just kills people with one shot. That's not cinematic.
Boom, 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 headshots. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah,
that's not very cinematic, right?
That's the only way you get out of that situation alive. Yeah,
yeah, and it feels like oh yeah, of course you can do that. Why didn't Why
you can just shoot people in the head? That's like a thing you can do.
Yeah, if you don't. If you're not overthinking the fact that you're killing people, and you're just treating it as like a job or what you do, that's how you do it. And that's kind of what the cleverness or the interesting part of it is to me. Which
my favorite example of this, Jamie, is I didn't have it written down, but it just came to mind when you said that, was when in the final battle with Vigo, where he lets Vigo stab him right in the abdomen in order to gain the upper hand. Like, that's a really meaningful choice. Yes. And that's like something only John Wick would do. We never see somebody be like, oh, stab me in the gut.
Yeah.
Like
it's like something, it's like from Lord of the Rings where he like lets him stab him and then he pulls the sword to his body more or something like that,
that's similar.
So in some ways he's always in control, but he's doing clever things that kind of show how smart he is, as opposed to just bang, 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 you're dead, and I can't tell you how often I read that. But what I was going to say with the structuring thing is, and this goes back to the club scene, if you're writing one of these stories and maybe you're using the sequence method that we've talked about, the mini movie method, for all I know, I think you can actually, if you kind of are approaching these kind of big action sequences, I think you could actually write a beat sheet for it. And whether or not you do a Save the Cat beat sheet, there's some nuances you'd have to do with the Save the Cat beat sheet, in my opinion, that are kind of like television. Like, you'd have to approach it like, do I already have my setup? Am I in act 2? Mm-hmm. Do I end before break? So, but there's another thing that when I teach short film, it's a very common thing that people use in short film. And the reason, like, I could teach a Save the Cat beat sheet to short filmmakers, but it might be too much. Like, I've personally written short films, like when I wrote VHS2's anthology, I used to Save the Cat beat sheet. I actually did use one. I
That's
actually
awesome.
this is the setup. There's a catalyst. There's break into 2. This happens. This happens.
It's called Right in the Park, your segment, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I do it all the time. Like we made 48-hour film projects. I use a Save the Cat beat sheet. I think that's a type of short film. That's a type of short film that has
I've done that
set up. Yeah. There's another type of short film that you just pop in, you end quick, and that's the way it is. So when I teach short
it's
film,
more sketch-like.
It's more sketch.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just about an idea. It's not really about a thing. Sometimes it's like a joke. It's just like telling a joke. So when I teach short film, and by the way, I'll spin this back to sequences in a second. When I teach short film, I use this other thing called Freytag's pyramid. Have I brought this up on the show?
No, never.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah.
And Freytag's pyramid apparently is taught in high schools and everything else, and it's almost like a vague version of I don't know, Sid Field or 3-act structure or something. It doesn't have all the beats is basically what it is. And Freytag was I can't remember, 1900 something like that, but this is taught in high school, and it goes like this. There's a period of exposition, which if you're a Save the Cat person would be very similar to everything up to the catalyst, right? So you're setting up who the players are, what the scenario is, all that stuff. And then there's usually some kind of inciting incident or catalyst. And then you just end up in a thing called rising action. So at the point of, when you're in the rising action section, you have a hero, goal, obstacle, and stakes for your scene or sequence or short film. Okay. Rising action, there's some question at hand. So let's relate this to a sequence. Let's say John Wick nightclub sequence. John Wick shows up at the nightclub looking for the guy he's trying to kill. I can't remember. Iosif, whatever. So he shows up. The exposition scene is, you could even say he shows up. Maybe the exposition even happens before.
The exposition is the guy in the pool, being an asshole.
Right. Yeah.
Once John Wick sees him, we're in Act 2. We're in rising action.
Right.
It's like, now I'm not leaving this place. I'm going to kill anything in my way to get this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the rising action. So
he sees him and then executes the guy he's on top of.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Freytag's pyramid, exposition. Then once you hit the rising action, pretty much that's the bulk of your thing. And the only real rule is in the rising action section is rising action. So it has to keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse. There's a question there.
Bad news, bad news.
More tense. Now, it could be bad news, good news, worse news, good news, worse news, good news, worse news.
Right.
That's
even
probably
worse
how
news.
it's good.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I like that.
But you have to stack it with the worst news. That's the key. So it has to keep getting more and more tense and keep getting worse. And in John Wick, what happens is they keep sending out, he's here, we get a couple guys. Then when he's in the nightclub, they're coming from all angles. They're coming from the front. They're coming from the back. They're all over the place. So it gets more and more tense. And the guy is closer to escaping, which makes things more tense too. He's closer to the door. So that's the rising action section. So what happens is, how do you determine the rising action section? It's much like a story. Will John Wick get the guy in the nightclub, or will the guy escape? That's the rising action section. Once you get to the point where you say the guy escapes, then you're in what's called falling action. And then sometimes you even get a little tag, which is kind of like an epilogue or resolution. Maybe the guy on the phone, or John Wick, like saying, "Oh, I'm injured, I got to come in," or whatever that is. That's the little tag. So the Freytag's pyramid is a simple 3-act structure for short films, but I think it works well with sequences as well.
Yeah, I think
that's
could
great.
Work for scenes, dude.
Scenes,
that's great. That's so useful.
Give me a 2-minute scene with that structure. Yes,
and it's really simple to remember: exposition, catalyst, rising action, climax. The climax is the point where you say he gets it, he doesn't get it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's like the guy gets away, he doesn't get away, whatever that thing is.
You know what? We should break down a scene sometime just with that. I think that would be good.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's good.
And
I can't believe we never covered it before.
I love it.
I think you could. I used to try to teach Save the Cat in a short film class, and I realized there were so many shorts that it's too much. It's too much. I do think you could break down like that scene, because it is like a 6-minute sequence with a Save the Cat beat sheet.
I
There's a
agree.
way to say the midpoint is, when they say he's here and he goes to that second section in the nightclub, all is lost might be when he gets shot, things like that. I think there are ways you could break it down almost, but I, in some ways, I think you'd have to have so many caveats. It might not be helpful, but my bigger fear is like, if you were doing this on your own, like you're writing John Wick and you said, I'm going to write a Save the Cat, you might write too much. I think I worry you'd write too much. You'd be like, oh, I need all is lost, and then a finale. And now your 3-minute scene would be like 15 minutes long because you wrote this big crazy thing. So without a lot of discipline, it's tricky to use Save the Cat for a sequence like that.
I like this Freytag's pyramid.
Freytag's pyramid. It's what's hilarious about Freytag's
What's it from?
There's a guy, story person. I can't remember his first name. Freytag was his last name, but he's like I can't remember, early 1900s, late 1800s, and that's what Freytag's pyramid. So it's an early. He's like early Robert McGee.
Still works.
Yeah. He's early Robert McGee.
And I'm sure there was someone before him. Yeah.
Right. On a cave wall.
Absolutely. It's like Aristotle. Aristotle.
Oh my God. The ancient Greek Robert McGee preaching.
So the funny thing, I was on Twitter not too long ago. Hopefully this person doesn't listen to us on Twitter. I don't think they do. And somebody was like, they were a video game writer or something, and they wrote like, I finally cracked the story structure of video games, and they showed Freytag's pyramid, and it didn't even look like they did it looked like they just stole it from the net.
Oh wow.
And everybody was praising
Maybe they just
them
got
like
there intuitively, though. I don't know.
Well, no, it was the same one I used, basically.
Oh, okay.
So and I kind of just had to chime in and say Freytag's pyramid, yay!
Good for you, Jamie.
They just liked it, right? Because everybody was like, "Wow, this is amazing that you came up with this." And
it's the age old when people say, that the Save the Cat is bullshit or the Robert McKee stuff is bullshit, and then they say you should do this, and it's the same damn thing with
the same exact.
The funny thing with the Freytag's pyramid was,
so Save the Cat, you mean?
I think they were basically saying like, forget Save the Cat and everything. I came up with this,
of course.
Jamie.
Like, by the way, not relevant to John Wick, but there is a book out there, and I don't want to bash it because I haven't read it. That just came out called "Kill the Cat." That is,
I think I heard that.
Like sort of trying to. I don't know. I'm gonna get it. And I'm gonna read it, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, so it's kind of like the new model.
Knew that it wasn't supposed to be a rule, and it's a guideline.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like it just feels like everyone is so like anti-authority.
We're talking about this again.
I know, but it is kind of crazy how people are like, no,
militant.
I suspect I'd
Fuck
read.
You.
I mean, here's the thing about Freytag's pyramid. It has direct influence on Save the Cat, and it was written in the early 1900s. I mean, you could see terminology that Sid Field used, Robert McKee used.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a thing. It's a thing. And I'm sure if I read Kill the Cat, I would, unless Kill the Cat was like, don't buy a book, just do whatever you want.
I'll get it. I'll get it.
I bet you I'd agree with a lot of its points.
Probably they're going to find great points. Yeah.
I'd be like, yeah, that's just like Save the Cat. I believe that I agree with your book because it has a lot of the same things that I believe in.
I think if people could hear your cadence about talking about Save the Cat, Jamie,
that's what I mean.
People would be less like, I feel like they were under its boot or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They feel like it's crushing them or something. It's like, no, it's
literally
casual.
It's like a brainstorming tool.
Yeah, right. It's so casual.
I do think I have a certain take on it. So that is one thing. But I also think that
Jamie's casual take.
There are more like newer writers who get in it and become very didactic with it. So they go to a writing group and say, you need a catalyst on page 12. And it,
where's your Dark Night of the Soul?
They feel very defensive in some ways. Right. So it feels less like an optimistic brainstorming tool and more like a way to tell them how bad they are. And I think that's what tends to happen. Gotcha. And also a lot of teachers teach it too. And teachers probably do the same thing. They're probably like, oh, I said in the book it says page 12, you put your catalyst on page 20. So you get an F,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. Oof. Yeah. So Anyway, Freytag's Pyramid.
I love
Freytag's
it.
Pyramid.
Thanks,
Thank
Jamie.
You.
That's
Yeah, thank you,
great.
Jamie.
Yeah.
Last point on here is nightmare fuel exercise. Whose was this?
Yeah, this was mine. So I'm not gonna go into it heavily like I've done in the past. Like, if you like what I say about it, because I'm gonna really do a brief take on it. We've done this in lots of episodes, specifically the Indiana Jones episode. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is a great example of the nightmare fuel exercise that doesn't have to be in a horror movie. It could be in a comedy. The one we went into the deepest, if you like this concept, and you're new to the show, is the Spider-Man No Way Home. Has 19 different of Spider-Man's of Peter's worst nightmares. 19 different examples of Peter's worst nightmares throughout the story. There's a prompt that I do, and I like to get my clients to do, because I don't see a lot of exploration of characters' fears, like really tapping into who they are as a character, as a person. And that is, the exercise is, ask yourself when you're brainstorming like your story, what is the worst thing that could happen to my character? Not knowing, what you're going to do with the plot, but just ask yourself, what is the worst thing that could ever happen to my character? Their worst nightmare. This could be emotionally. This could be physically. It could come in any form, people, places, things, scenarios that are the worst nightmares of your character. And whiteboarding the answers to that question is gonna ensure that we're watching your character overcome like obstacles when they're at their worst, right? If these are their worst nightmares, then we're gonna be experiencing them like overcoming these situations when they're at their worst, which is gonna inherently reveal character and make it like an emotionally engaging experience for the audience. So I thought this was a great example. This movie, it doesn't have 19 like Spider-Man No Way Home, but all of the worst things that could ever happen to John happen in this movie. He loses his wife. He loses his dog. He loses his beloved car, which they do a good job clarifying, showing us that it's his beloved car. He loses his freedom from the crime world. He loses his peaceful retirement. Then he loses his friend Marcus, the one friend we see him have post-wife death, and amidst all this chaos, Marcus, he loses his friend. And then amidst all this, he's losing his health, right? Like, he's bleeding. He's constantly like
a little more abstract, but he's losing his hope. He lost his hope.
He lost his hope. He lost his hope. He lost his soul, man. Yeah. So I think asking yourself, what's the worst that could ever happen to my character? And like, make them experience that. And this can be in a comedy, right? What's the worst thing that could ever happen to Steve Martin's character in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles? Being stuck with John Candy's character,
right.
For the duration.
It's like there's an old adage that every movie is a horror movie to an extent. So nightmare fuel, it works.
The mere act of having conflict, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, the prompt is, I wasn't planning on saying this, but the prompt is, I always try to get my clients to ask, how could the worst thing, in this case, it's a tragedy. So it doesn't answer this question. This story is a tragedy, I think we decided upon. But how could the worst thing that ever happened to your character end up being the best thing that ever happened to your character? Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, is a great example of that. Asking that question is going to get you a great conceptual.
Do you feel that applies to John Wick?
No, I said to John Wick, it's a tragedy. So
okay.
That doesn't apply. Yeah, no, I think it's a tragedy. So it
just continually stays.
It's almost like the question would be, his wife was, how could the best thing that ever happened to you end up being the worst thing that ever happened to you?
I mean,
right. That's great.
Since it's a tragedy, the prompt would be the opposite.
That's the before movie.
That's so maybe in a tragedy you ask, how could the worst thing that ever happened to my character end up being? How could the best thing that ever happened? Anyway, yeah.
I mean, weirdly enough, with John Wick, and there really is no good arc in sight. Like, I don't know what the lesson he should learn is, based on the story. So I guess there's an argument to be made, and we as fans probably feel this way, that he's kind of stuck in a rut. And somehow this adventure gets him living again or something. I don't know. I don't know if that's.
I guess there's an argument to be made that he's back, and that's.
I mean, that's the quote, right? I'm thinking I'm back.
I'm thinking I'm back, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So so
he feels it in his gut.
Because when you think about, when you ask that question about, what's the worst thing that could happen, you have to say now. So it's like after his wife, like his wife died in the past.
Yes.
So like now what's the worst? And I guess the dog dying in some ways.
It is the worst in that moment. Yeah, that's his hope. Yeah. He said, you killed that for me. Yeah.
And then this weird, twisted, positive arc version I'm spinning, that is the best thing that could happen because it kicks off a chain of events that brings back somebody that's no longer stuck in the rut that they were in the beginning of the movie.
Interesting.
I mean, sort of.
Yeah, I think there's an argument to be made for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I don't know if it's a true premise. Like, I don't know that people agree, like that sit out and are like, yes, if we are sad, we should become killers or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
I think,
but
Jamie,
maybe there's a
like,
version.
if we're sad, we should fight.
We should
not fight back in him.
Fight back.
We should live.
Well, I mean, for the audience, like not saying killing people, but if you're really sad, maybe you should fight in some way in life to fight
for your
new
future.
Goal or
fight for your future.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, fight for your future.
Right.
Okay, I can apply that metaphor.
Nobody hurt anyone.
Yeah, no, my God. No, I started the podcast talking about my history of gun violence.
Not you. I just read.
Family.
We're not, right. I'm saying it's a metaphorical thing for the audience. You fight when.
I think that applies. You can apply that here.
Yeah.
I like it, Jamie.
Yeah, I do.
I don't think we walk out of John Wick necessarily feeling, oh, it's so sad. He's back to the old ways before the death of his wife.
That's true.
Instead, we're like, he's back, man. High five.
Yeah. That's true. That's true.
For whatever reason.
You're also happy the bad guys are dead.
Bad guys are dead.
The guys who are worse than him are dead. He is a bad guy.
Justice was served, right?
Justice was served.
Everything we talked about it, but it's to be said that John Wick isn't a good human being.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Right. That's true.
I think that's everything, guys.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Did you have anything you wanted to plug? Jamie, you already did your plugs. Did you have anything else you wanted to say?
No, I don't think. I think that's it.
Yeah,
okay.
I don't have anything to plug right now. So
yeah, I'm good. All I'll say is, if you like the show, share it. And if you want to leave us a review on Apple, please do. If you want to support the show, patreon.com/BobRoseSucks. Other than that, I got nothing else, guys.
Hell yeah. This was fun. I feel like I learned a lot about the movie.
I really did.
Talking this out. Yeah.
This is a real good whiteboard episode.
Yeah.
Really on John Wick. Yeah. Other than that, John Wick 4 rules. Everybody should see it. Anyway, that's it.
I gotta catch up.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Bye. Hey, this is Bob Rose, and thank you for listening to Writers Blockbusters. If you'd like to financially support the show, please consider joining my Patreon. I've been producing the podcast for several years completely out of pocket, and I'd like to keep producing it ad-free and no longer at a loss. If you'd like to help, head on over to patreon.com/BobRoseSucks. That's right, Bob Rose Sucks. And if you want the one and only Jimmy George to help polish up that writing project you're kind of struggling with, head on over to scriptbutcher.com. As a listener, you already know he's the best there is, scriptbutcher.com. You can also support the show by simply sharing it or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate both. Thank you for listening and see you next episode.